Really hard. I got it on my- Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order.
I'd like to call the meeting to order.
Wonderful job. I'm going to take over from here for just a little bit. Stay there. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, January 21st, 2020. We are here for the purpose of the regular meeting of the Elmhurst City Council. I have with me Mayor for a day, Genevieve Skokolski. Did I pronounce that correct? Pretty good, huh? Her parents are right here, and her older sister. Jennifer has been shadowing me. Too bad for her, but she shadowed me today, and we toured City Hall. We actually broke in on Alderman Toledo and the Cub Scouts holding a meeting here, and then they were kind enough to join me for dinner, and we came back here, and Genevieve is 9 years old, and she is a fourth grader from Lincoln School. Is that right? And she wants to be a lawyer. So let's see. It's do I see the Cub Scouts? Where are the Cub Scouts? Raise your hand. Is that Pack 78 from Edison? Yes. Say.
I invite Pack 78 to come up here and say the pledge.
Wonderful. Okay, guys, come on up here. All rise, please. Line up right there, right over there.
Face the flag.
But face this way. Okay. You tell them when they're good to go. Say you're good to go.
Good to go.
All right. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pack 78.
Good job, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, I am going to excuse Mayor Genevieve from her duties for right now, but she's going to join her parents in the front row. How about a round of applause? It takes a lot of guts to stand up here and do that in front of you guys. And I tell you what, I did spend a lot of time with Genevieve and her family, and I think the future's in good shape with both her and her sister. So, after Pledge of Allegiance, I ask Clerk Malone to call the roll.
York.
Here.
Toledo.
Here.
Park.
Here.
Levin.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Conquest.
Here.
Brennan.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here.
Joyder.
Here.
Sabatino.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Kolumski.
Here.
14 present, 0 absent.
14 present, 0 absent, motion carries. Now before us, we have an appointment for city clerk. As council is aware, our city clerk, Patty Spencer, after a long and tough battle with cancer, passed away. According to our city code, it is up to the mayor to appoint with advice and consent of council. Before I and I sent you all documentation with my recommendation for appointment. And before I ask for a motion, I want to give council just a quick update on the process that I used. So council's aware, I've done this now 3 times since I've been mayor, where I've had the opportunity to appoint a vacated spot for an elected official. All 3 times, I did what I call an open casting call. Not only do I announce it publicly, but we do a press release. I'm happy to say that we had 7 members of the community who submitted applications. I had the opportunity to interview all 7 candidates personally. I was very happy that Jackie Tamer threw her hat into the ring. You folks will probably recognize her. She's not new to us. She is the chairman of the Elmhurst Commission on Youth, and has built that commission up from 3 people up to 9, and does a fantastic job. But as I said, I had 7 willing participants. I interviewed all 7 personally. It is my belief that Jackie Tamer is best suited for the job, and I hope you will support my choice. That having been said, I will entertain a motion to confirm my appointment of city clerk of Jackie Haddad. Motion by Alderman Mulliner, second by Alderman Honquist. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'll ask Clerk Malone to, and then after council confirms, I'm going to ask Jackie to come up and I'm going to swear her in. Clerk Malone, please call the vote.
York.
Aye.
Ludo.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Conquest.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Joyder.
Aye.
Sabatino.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Palumski.
Aye.
14 ayes, 0 nays.
14 ayes, 0 nays. I will congratulate Jackie after I swear her in. Oh, pardon. Oh, thanks, Bob. Good job, Genevieve. Jackie, I recognize members of your family. Let's bring up your members. It's official. I can't swear you in without them. Yeah, I spot an uncle with these, right? No? Okay. Haddad family, let's go, come on, don't be shy. And the kids, come on, guys. Nephew, all of them, let's go. Emo, what's your brother? Bill and Ron are out there? Ron, let's go. Jackie, real quick, why don't you tell us who's up here with you?
Abby and Elias, my uncle and my father, Bill, my dad, Miguel, my other uncle, Ron, my brother's Mike, his son, nephew, Andrew, and my other brother, Don.
Congratulations. I want to mix this up. Read it. Please repeat after me. Raise your right hand. I, Jackie Haddad Tamer, solemnly swear and affirm
Do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I support the Constitution
the Constitution of
of the United States,
the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the charter laws and ordinances of the City of Elmhurst,
and the charter laws and ordinances of the City of Elmhurst,
and that I'm qualified to serve
and I'm qualified to serve
and will faithfully discharge the duties
and will faithfully discharge the duties
of City Clerk
of
of the City of Elmhurst
the City of Elmhurst
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. Family, scoot together. Paul's gonna take a picture of us here. Flank some people on this side. There we go. I hope I can get it. I'll make it perfect.
Wait for me.
Just go somebody point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I gotta put you to work. So let's get up there.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you.
All right, you sit there. Amanda, are you gonna co-chair?
Tutoring.
Okay, Jackie, Amanda's, I know you have been up to speed a little bit, but now you're actually up here.
I am.
Amanda's here for moral support and anything else you need.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Well, congratulations again, Jackie. Agenda item 4, Metro Paramedics. Oh, the irony. The ambulance folks had an emergency. They're not here tonight. So we're going to skip that portion. We'll go in detail later, but we do that once a year. We have a unique contract with our local ALS folks for our ambulances, and they have some good news to share. But we'll do that in another meeting. On to agenda item 5, receipt of written communications from the public. At this time, is there anybody who has any written communications to the public? If so, please raise your hand if you have any written communications. If you had any, you deliver them to our new clerk, Jackie. But you don't have any. Okay, on to public forum. Agenda item 6. This is an opportunity for anybody in the audience to address the council on any issue they so choose. When your name gets called, we ask that you make your way to the microphone over here on my right, your left. Chief Ruth, raise your hand. It's right there next to Chief Ruth, that microphone over there. Once you've been called, we ask that you approach the microphone and state your name for the record. We are recording this. Your address is optional. We ask, out of respect for work that we have to get done here this evening, and out of respect for others who may want to speak, that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. If you go over 3 minutes, I will give you a gentle reminder, and I will ask you to wrap up. And again, we ask that you address your councils to me, the chair. Clerk Tamer, at this time, has anybody signed up for public forum?
Yes, Mayor.
Great.
Tony Tortorello.
The right microphone here? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Tony Tortorello. I live at 449 East Court here in Elmhurst. My wife and I have been residents of the city of Elmhurst for 44 plus years. And I'm here tonight to speak to the council on behalf of the Anglowitz family. I'm sure you're all familiar with the technical details about their request for variance. I'm not going to go into the details about that. I'm sure you're all very well familiar with those aspects. And oftentimes when you get into numbers, you kind of get lost in the numbers and kind of lose perspective on some of the issues that might be of more importance. And it's one of those things that I would like to offer as a perspective to the members of the council. As I said, we live in Elmhurst for over 44 years now, and I have seen my neighborhood turn over at least twice. A lot of people have come and a lot of people have gone. I've seen people come and go. I suspect many of you on the council have very similar experiences that. But what I'm here to talk about tonight is, it seems to me a little different perspective on the consideration before you. I'd like to suggest that it seems to me that the council has a very unique opportunity here to help one of our neighbors and community members. Mark and Rosie have moved here, like many of us have, and could have chosen anywhere, but they chose Elmhurst, and they chose it for their own reasons. And it seems to me that they're asking for a little bit of help in remaining citizens and members of Elmhurst. I'm not sure that you may ever see an opportunity as unique as this, where the council has a very direct chance to help somebody who wants to stay a citizen and a neighbor. And I would offer you my perspective that I hope you'll embrace the opportunity that this is presented to you. And I would,
I'd ask you to wrap up, please.
I'm finished with my formal comments. So thank you for the chance to speak. I hope you'll embrace the opportunity before you tonight.
Ben Silver.
Good evening. My name is Ben Silver, and I'm a community lawyer with the Citizen Advocacy Center at 188 Industrial Drive. My comment tonight pertains to items 9.1 and 9.2 on the agenda, the DPZ Committee reports on the variation request at 188 East Elmhurst Avenue. In accordance with state law, the Elmhurst Municipal Code allows for variations where there are, quote, practical difficulties or particular hardships in the way of carrying out the strict letter of the regulations in the zoning code. The code goes on to require and define evidence of practical difficulties or particular hardship as 1. The plight of the owner is due to unique circumstances, and 2. The variation, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, and 3. Property in question cannot yield a reasonable return or provide the owner or tenants a reasonable enjoyment of the property if permitted to be used only under the conditions allowed by the regulations in its zone. My concern is that this is not the standard applied by the majority of the DPZ committee. The record in front of you and available on board docs clearly shows the considered approach of the Zoning and Planning Commission in reaching approval of a variation up to 36% of lot coverage. A majority of the Zoning and Planning Commission found that each of the 3 standards for evidence of practical difficulties or particular hardship was in fact met. On the other hand, you do not have a record from the DPZ majority discussing these standards. The majority report on tonight's agenda notes that the majority refused to consider an increase above the codified 30% standard. The report from the December 2nd meeting of the City Council states only that, quote, the committee agreed that 35% is too large of a request, but it does not cover the standards. That simply does not reflect anything in the standards. In fact, at last week's DPZ committee meeting, we heard hardship defined as something like a disabled child or elderly parent that might require a variation. While those circumstances might be considered evidence to meet the standards for a variation, that is far from a complete definition. If that were the case, the city would not be approving things like sign variations for businesses so that they can stand out on our busy commercial streets. Rather, the particular circumstances of those businesses allow the City Council to reach the conclusion that a larger and or taller sign will help the businesses receive a reasonable return. Similarly, a slight variation on the Anglowitz's property will allow them to receive a reasonable return on their property where a particular hardship under the existing code would not. This property exhibits unique circumstances in that it is one of the 3 smallest lots in the R2 zone. It is a 130-year-old home built long before today's standards of living or standards in the Elmhurst Code. The variation would in no way alter the essential character of the neighborhood and would in all likelihood provide benefit to the neighbors in making a 130-year-old structure all the more livable with only minor change in footprint, as you've heard from their neighbors. This property can neither yield a reasonable return nor provide the family reasonable enjoyment of a property in that, under the conditions allowed in the Elmhurst Code, they cannot bring their home to modern neighborhood standards. This is a hardship. This family has worked diligently with the builder, with city staff, and with neighbors to put forward as narrow of a proposal as possible to meet their needs and alleviate their hardship.
Mr. Silver, you're at your 3 minutes. I'd ask you to wrap up,
Thank you.
please.
Thank you to the aldermen who voted for the previous proposal, and thank you, Alderman Dunn, for performing the necessary variation analysis and writing the minority report. The City Council should, at the very least, substitute the minority report and accept a variation of 31% lot coverage. And it's my opinion that the previous plan also met city standards and should have been accepted and still should be accepted now. Thank you.
Bob Garlow.
I live in the same block as the Engelwitz do, and just want to say
Could you state your name for
that.
the record, please?
Pardon me?
Could you state your name for the record, please?
As she said, Bob Garlow.
Okay.
I live in the same block as they do, and I live right next to a house that was just torn down because it only had 2 bathrooms. It was 110 years old and didn't meet today's standards. And beautiful home, all kinds of wood trim inside, stained glass windows, built-in cabinets, but it just didn't meet today's standards. And it's sad to see that an old home like that has to be torn down. We got people here who want to keep their home. They want to stay in the neighborhood. I think they're trying to go for, what, 50 feet of an expansion on the house. It's crazy that that has to go through the group. This city was the one that agreed to the size of the land that the house is on many years ago, right? Not the Engelwitz that weren't involved in it, but it was something that the city was involved in and approved the lots to be the size that they are. I understand there's 3 other ones in town that have the same issue, and I hope those people never have to go through this ordeal. It's unbelievable. I think that's all I have for the group tonight. Thank you.
Jen Laddish Douglas.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. My name is Jennifer Laddish Douglas, and I'm a homeowner here in Elmhurst. I live in Ward 5, and I've been a real estate attorney for more than 20 years. I'm also a licensed real estate broker of more than 10 years. I have no personal interest in this matter and represent no one related to this matter. In fact, I met the Engelwitz family for the first time today. I'm here as a member of the Elmhurst community, and I'm here to speak in support of their request for a variance for their home. I became aware of their story and struggle with obtaining a variance through the newspaper and was nothing short of shocked when I saw that the variance had not been granted. I read the reports and requests available as of last Thursday and firmly believe that this family has unequivocally met the requirements of this 3-pronged test to be granted a variance. The plight of the owner is the first prong. It's a unique circumstance. Clearly, this situation is unique given that the home is 130 years old and is on a lot that is only 4,534 square feet, far smaller than the current requirement of 7,260 for R2 zoning. The small home and 1-car garage take up the majority of the 30% build limit, yet the home is far smaller than the majority of single-family homes built here today. The second variance, if granted, is that the property not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. It is clear from visiting this neighborhood that it is a mix of property built over 100 years, and adding a small addition that matches the current appearance of the home will not cause any change of character to this neighborhood. And I'd also like to note that in the testimony I have seen to date, there has not been a single objection to this project by the neighborhood. No one. Third, the property in question cannot yield a reasonable return or provide the owner a reasonable enjoyment of the property if permitted to be used only under the conditions allowed by the regulations in its zone. It is clear that this requirement has become a sticking point for some, as they have compared the needs and desires of this family to those of others outside of our community who may not even have a bathroom. Or they may suggest that this family move. This isn't what a variance request is about. A variance request is about the family where they are now, where they want to be now, and they have been there for 12 years. The variance request clearly says it is about how the owner is impacted, not anyone else. The issue is whether they will receive a reasonable return and whether they will enjoy the property, not anyone else. The owner is right there in the requirement. A home in our town with only 1 full bathroom is not as marketable as one with 2 or more. I can say this without any doubt, given my extensive real estate experience. And for enjoyment, any family with children knows the joy that comes from having more than 1 bathroom.
Excuse me, you're over your 3 minutes. I'd ask you to wrap up.
Almost
please.
done. Having this bathroom will absolutely increase their enjoyment as it would for anyone. I ask that you grant the variance request of the Engelwitz family so that they can increase the value, use, and enjoyment of their very unique property. Thank you.
Susan O'Donnell Warren.
Susan O'Donnell Warren, 627 South Poplar Avenue, Elmhurst. Honestly, I had the highest of hopes we would not all be meeting like this when the city voted unanimously to invite the Engelwitz family to resubmit plans for their modest addition to their small but charming 1890s farmhouse, 1 week after their original submission was defeated by a vote from Mayor Steve Morley, breaking a 6-6 tie. You can see why I would be hopeful. It was 2 weeks before Christmas. 6 aldermen, Scott Levin, Tina Park, Michael Bram, Danny Polomsky, Marty Deuter, and Kevin York had already said yes. Yes, you can build your second full bathroom for your small but charming 1890s farmhouse. It simply never occurred to me that 6 aldermen who voted no, you can't, would invite a family with 3 growing young children to spend their hard-earned dollars on new plans because they believed the city council had done such a fine job of denying the family's request once, they were looking to deny it again 4 weeks later. Who does that? I'm still hopeful because we have here tonight at least one alderman of the original 6 no votes who doesn't do that. Alderman Bob Dunn voted no last month, but he had a good look at the resubmitted plans. He listened to his constituents and residences and the family, and he voted yes at the DBZ last Monday. A politician fears changing his or her vote. They think it might make them appear weak or dilute their power. It takes a leader, a real leader, to say, hey, guys, we can do better. Let's put our heads together on this one. Let's fix this. Thank you, Alderman Dunn. To all of you voting tonight, my request is simple. There's a city of Elmhurst, its mayor and its aldermen, and sometimes you all have served it very well and thoughtfully. But there's also a town called Elmhurst. When something goes wrong, when a shadow reappears on a scan, when a business goes under 5 months before your 25th work anniversary, when your child is ill and you have no idea what's wrong, it's not the city of Elmhurst that shows up on your doorstep. It's the town. It's this town called Elmhurst that wraps its arms around you, gives you a hug, a beer, or a casserole, and says, hey, don't worry about the carpool. Don't worry about shoveling the driveway. We've got you. It's relationships that make friendships. It's friendships that make neighborhoods. And it's neighborhoods that make a town. That's why it's so honestly jarring when an elected official says to someone making a life for their family in this town called Elmhurst, hey, you need a little more space now that all 3 kids can use a toilet? Move. Get a bigger house. Rules exist for a good reason, but so do variances. If this variance is granted tonight, it will only potentially affect a maximum of 3 other lots, and 2 of those lots have not expressed interest in doing an addition. If the Engelwitz family is once more turned away disappointed, if it is okay for a family to be labeled duplicitous in the local paper for seeking a bathroom, a second full bath for a house with 5 people, some of you up there are actually going to believe that you are doing the right thing for the city of Elmhurst, but you are strangling this town.
Ms. Warren, you're over your 3 minutes. I'd ask you to wrap up, please.
Thank you, Alderman Levin, Park, Bram, Polomsky, Deuter, York, and Dunn. To the rest of you, please, before you vote, step back, take a breath, think about your folks and the house you grew up in, or the house you wish you grew up in, and think about your dreams for your kids when you first moved here. Thank you.
Benz.
Hello, my name is Julie Bentz. I live on Willow Road in Elmhurst, just down the block from the Anglowitzes, also part of the old Elmhurst Gardens subdivision. And I would also like to support the council voting in favor of letting them make this variation. I've lived in Elmhurst for more than 60 years. I was really small when we moved out here. And I understand completely that maintaining permeable ground space is important for the city moving forward. But I also know that the council has been concerned that rampant new construction has caused the city to lose some of its charm. And for me, what has given Elmhurst its charm is frankly not its downtown, but the residential neighborhoods. And what gives the residential neighborhoods their charm and interest is the diversity of housing, the fact that the houses don't look like each other, that they are different sizes, shapes, styles. And I think it's important for the city to work with people like the Anglowitzes who are willing to maintain the diversity of housing stock, to lovingly maintain an older building, which, like many, including, frankly, my house and the house of both of my neighbors, have variations or aspects that wouldn't meet today's code. I think this is precisely the sort of place where a variation which will not change the character of the neighborhood, unlike, for example, the 4 other teardowns on the block, which are being replaced by cookie-cutter McMansions, do change the neighborhood. I think it's important for Elmhurst to maintain its variety of current housing stock, and that, again, encourage you to vote for this variation for people, a family like the Anglowitzes who are willing to work with the city to maintain the character and beauty of our residential neighborhoods. Thank you.
Edgar Pal.
Good evening. My name is Edgar Pal, and I am here to support the minority report for the Anglewicks variation request. I attended the previous meeting on December 2nd in which the council considered this matter. I've also been following the coverage of the Anglewicks family and their request on local newspapers, including the Elmhurst Patch. I'm especially troubled by an article published on the Patch a week ago on January 14. According to reporter David Giuliani, Alderman Honquist referred to the Anglewicks couple as duplicitous. Regardless of your opinion on this variation request, I hope you'll agree that it is highly improper for a public official to impugn the motivations of private residents. The Anglewicks family has submitted their requests according to the procedures laid out by the City Council. I find it hard to believe that their subsequent requests make them appear duplicitous. Furthermore, according to Mr. Giuliani, Alderman Honquist stated that the City Council's 30% coverage rule applies to anyone, rich or poor. But why is it even relevant to draw a distinction between the rich and the poor of Elmhurst? Has anyone actually questioned the financial standing of the Anglewicks family in a way that is relevant to this case? Alderman Honquist is correct in saying that the rich and the poor should be treated equally. But sadly, the record of this council has shown that that is not always the case. Over a year ago, this council approved a variation request for the condo building at 105 South Cottage Hill, after the developer offered a $20,000 donation to the Public Arts Commission. Is this what differentiates the rich from the poor in Elmhurst? Are the Anglewickses being denied their request just because they're not offering a donation to fund a city commission? Does the city grant variances only to rich developers or well-funded builders? Is the city's public arts projects more important than its integrity? Lastly, I was troubled to see that on December 2nd, Alderman Toludo voted against the variation request. I wonder if her vote was motivated in part by the fact that Mr. Anglewicks ran against her during the 2019 municipal election. Even though she may be legally allowed to vote on this matter, it is reasonable for the general public to perceive a conflict of interest. Therefore, I ask the council to consider whether it is proper for her to vote. Thank you.
Mark Engelwitz.
Hello, my name is Mark Engelwitz, homeowner at 188 East Elmhurst Avenue. I'd like to start by thanking city staff for all their assistance during this process. They've been very helpful and professional throughout it. I'd also like to thank all of the Elmhurst residents that have been so supportive of our efforts so far in getting up here and speaking today. For some very beautiful words coming out of some folks here, and I really appreciate it. Both Rosie and I are very, very appreciative of that. I'd like to take time to touch on a couple of items, but first I want to go through our case and how our request meets the standards, 3 standards. Standard 1, our residential lot is only one of 3 R2 lots that are less than 5,000 square feet. It was never subdivided by the city, and our houses existed prior to any city ordinances, thus making a unique circumstance. Standard 2, the essential character of the neighborhood would not be affected. The addition will actually improve and enhance the value of the property and the houses around it. Standard 3, if not granted, we cannot yield a reasonable return, as 2 bathrooms is a standard required for this area for a single-family home. Even when we bought the house in 2008, it was on the market for 2 years because it only had one full bathroom, lacked other modern features such as air conditioning, which has since been updated. We have done improvements to the house every couple of years and kept the most expensive for last, as well as waiting for our youngest to turn 2. During last week's DP&Z meeting, we submitted 2 proposals, one at 30% and one at 31%. The 30% option initially submitted was rushed to make the City Council agenda the previous month. And after further review and discussion with our designer, was determined that it will require my family to move out of the house for a 4-month period during construction. This is the case because our second floor will have to be redesigned, causing us to lose the only shower we have in the house. Also, some of the bedrooms will be impacted, so it's not a livable situation while the work is going on. The 31% option, although only 49 square feet larger, can be completed in phases and will not cause the loss of the bathroom during construction. Lastly, the cost per square foot of the 30% option is higher, and while the 31% option has costs for the new structure, the 30% option has costs for redesigning and constructing the layout of the second floor, which in a 134-year-old house is expensive. In the end, although not ideal as compared to the original plan, we can live with the 31% option, and it's only 49 square feet additive coverage. Our lot is 4,530 square feet, and again, the third smallest lot in Elmhurst. The additional 49 square feet of coverage will make no difference in how the structure impacts the lot, but will make a difference to my family both in terms of enjoyment of the home and financial return on our investment. I can't tell you how disappointed I have been during the last 6-month process. It is my opinion that there are members of this council that have allowed this process to become personal to them, resulting in my wife and I being publicly accused of being deceptive in our request and putting us through a higher level of scrutiny, even compared to much larger and more impactful commercial developments, while numerous variations have been granted, including conditional use permit to exceed 90 feet height limitation, something that never had been done before. Let me set the record straight. My wife and I have been nothing but transparent from day one. We've done everything the city has asked for and more. We did a new land survey to ensure measurements were all correct. Every piece of information we shared regarding precedent was collected via FOIA request from city staff, and yes, I reached out to many aldermen on this council to inform them of our plans, answer questions, and seek their support. Of course I did. I wanted the best chance for success. As we have to live with your decision. What is just a Monday night agenda to you is real life to us. The decision you make here will have an impact on the life of my family for as long as we live in this house. So my wife and I took measures to ensure we gave ourselves the best shot for our family, and I would expect you to do the same for yours. Thank you.
Rosie Engelwitz.
I'm not going to go into much more detail regarding our variance application and request, as I feel all the facts which we have gathered through FOIA requests and with the help of city staff and our design firm has been presented several times to you all. And using the correct definitions of the standards, one cannot dispute we don't meet the 3 standards. So my question to those voting no to our request of 30% is why? This past week, I FOIA'd previous multifamily developer cases for the buildings on Addison and the Cottage Hill building as well. I went through each case to understand and educate myself on why those developers met the standards for their variances, waivers, and right-of-way license requests. I'm not disagreeing and or agreeing with the decisions made by the council, but just trying to understand their reasons for their request and their approvals. All of them stated in their application, if not granted with the variance, fee waiver, or right-of-way license, they would experience a financial hardship or would not be able to yield a reasonable return. So my question to you is, how are we different? I'm asking you for our case to be reviewed and voted on with the same lenses as the developer cases have been proved. Before I make my last comment, I want to thank the city staff for helping us through the process, and Alderman Levin, Polomsky, York, Park, Deuter, Brom for reviewing our case based on the standards. as well as Alderman Dunn for the minority report. Which brings me to my last point. I have never experienced the unwarranted callousness that I have experienced during this process. From the first commission hearing, where my choice to be a mother was questioned and deliberated to ensure we wouldn't come back for another request if we had another child. Quote, what if the Englewitzes decided to have another baby? To the libel in the patch by labeling us duplicitous and insinuating that we are poor. Being told we should be grateful for even having one bathroom. To being told to stop talking during a committee hearing when trying to correct facts, which were provided to us by city staff, and being told in the same meeting that by reviewing our requests, the aldermen are doing us a big favor. I have worked in the public sector for over 15 years. I've worked for the City of Cleveland Planning Department, DuPage County Commission, and now as a consultant for the federal government. And I have never seen such intimidation and bullying of a constituent. Our request is reasonable, meets all three standards, and how we have been treated by the opposition is deplorable. Put yourself in the shoes of your constituents and ask yourself, how would you feel if you were put through this process for the last 6 months to add a second full bathroom to a property so unique and historical that has been around before the city's ordinances even existed? Thank you.
Anyone else?
That's it, Mayor.
Okay, that's it for those who signed up for public forum. Is there anybody in the audience who did not have an opportunity to sign in on our sign-in sheet but wishes to address council? Please raise your hand so I can get a count, please. I'm only going to ask this once. All right, so this lady in front and Ms. Virgil in back. We'll start with you, ma'am, and then Ms. Virgil will go to you.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Irene Dinning. I live at 325 West Winthrop Avenue in Elmhurst, and I've lived in the house for 20 plus years. And what I can say about it is the original part of the house was built in 1915. I'm told that we were one of the first major additions to an older home in the Elmhurst community. And I can tell you that the amount of joy that my family receives from being able to live in that home is immeasurable. The detail of the old house, the fact that a lot of level of effort went into making the new part really coordinate with it, and basically the same kind of a situation that the Angloviches have, except for the fact that we didn't need a variance in this case. We went from a one-bathroom to a 2.5. So I can only imagine what these people are trying to go through to basically raise their home to a more modern-day standard.
Ma'am, I'm going to hold you for 1 second. I just want to make sure that microphone's hot. Can we hear?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can hear.
Just the normal microphone's behind you. I
No
want to make
problem.
sure you're being recorded.
Okay.
So go ahead, you can continue.
So, bottom line is I really feel for these people. I actually had an opportunity to be in Rosie and Mike's house. It didn't dawn on me till last week because it was actually on an Elmhurst historical walk, and I was amazed by the beauty of it and what they had done with such a small house at that point in time before they had children. So the fact that they've stayed in the community, made this kind of a commitment, and are trying to raise a family here, I think is incredible. And for us to be having this kind of a discussion around 1%, I find it incredible. I can also say that I was at the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting last week, and I was very impressed with the review that Alderman Dunn did on his minority report. I thought it was thoughtful, it was detailed, and it was appropriate with regards to all the standards. And I really ask that strong consideration be given to that report and the request of the Anglovich family. There's a reason why a variance process exists. I believe that they've been very diligent in working with the city to try to get to this point, to come to a win-win after all these submittals. And I ask you to please reconsider, in the case of the individuals who did not vote for this variance, please reconsider for families like themselves. Like I said, I could have been in their boat myself a number of years ago. Thank you.
Ms. Virgil?
Hey guys, I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I was inspired by some of the people before me, so I'll keep it brief.
Please state your name for the record.
Nicole Virgil, 598 South Fairview. I know you all are sincere in your attempt to serve in your role on this council. I wasn't as aware of how city operations worked until we went through our hoop house situation. And as I was listening to Mark and Rosie talk tonight about the things they were disappointed and disheartened about, it occurred to me that, you know, sometimes when you're working in a thing or working in a group or a team, you might be trying to do something, achieve a thing, do a goal, you know, achieve a goal, and you can become a little bit insulated, you know, because maybe you guys are talking to you guys and amongst yourselves, and you can see that each one of you is trying to do something and not realize that to the people who have to live with your decisions, you're crushing us. You might not realize how insulated you've become from the effect of your decisions. It appears that way because now that I'm not involved and engaged with you guys on a monthly basis, and I'm watching other people go through the hell that it is to interact with the city government here, I would like to believe that you don't truly understand what it feels like. This process that you put us through, it's not necessary to be this convoluted. When they mentioned 6 months of difficulty, oh my gosh, do you know what that felt like to me on the inside? I was like, oh my gosh, I wish it had been only 6 months. After 3 years, I wish it had been only 6 months. And that's a crazy thing to think. Why does this process have to be so convoluted? There's smart people up there. These are not complicated issues. We can agree to common principles. Property rights, variances. Clearly you're comfortable with variances. In my case, this insulated mindset kept you guys from even understanding the definition of temporary versus permanent, and you applied a permanent building code to my temporary structure, and never once would any of you answer as to why. Never. In 3 years. It's bizarre, and I'd like you guys to understand that while you do attempt good and accomplish some good for the city, that you're not giving yourselves a good reputation overall to many good people who would do even better things for this city if you wouldn't stomp on us. Stop. There's no need for it. Just ease up a bit and be a little bit more logical. This doesn't have to be so hard for the Englewitzes, for my family, for the Fremont Avenue folks. It doesn't have to be so torturous. You guys have to stop being so insulated and let yourself imagine what it's like to be us. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll move on. That wraps up public forum. Any announcements from the dais? Alderman York?
Thank you, Your Honor. So I'd just like to, there's a nice crowd here tonight. The Elmhurst College basketball team is the number 4 ranked basketball team in Division III basketball this year. So if you get a chance, come out and watch a game. It's pretty exciting.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other announcements? Alderman Brennan.
Thank you. Alderman Molnar and I will be hosting a town hall meeting on February 6th, 6:30 to 8 p.m. at the Elmhurst Community Bank at Spring and Butterfield. Hope to see you there. 7th Ward. Thank you.
Okay. Any other announcements? Clerk Tamer. Sorry, I got to get that. I got to get used to that. Clerk Tamer, the floor is yours.
All right. City Clerk's office has scheduled 2 sessions of training for the Freedom of Information Act and Open Meetings Act in conjunction with the Illinois Attorney General's office on Monday, January 27th at 2:30 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. This training is aimed at elected officials, volunteer commissioners, and staff and goes into greater detail than the IAG online training. The city has extended this training to the school district, library, and park district. We plan to host this at City Hall in the City Council chambers The city will have our regular scheduled committee meetings that evening, starting at 7:00 p.m. Thank you. 6:30, is it 6 or 6:30?
6 o'clock.
It is 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock. So 2:30 and 6 o'clock.
And that'll be posted on our website, I assume? Okay. Any other announcements? Seeing none, we'll move on to consent agenda. At this time, is there any alderman who wishes to have anything pulled from the consent agenda to vote no or provide additional comment? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda in its entirety. Motion by Alderman Toledo, second by Alderman York. Clerk Tamer. Call the vote, please.
York?
Aye.
Toledo?
Aye.
Park?
Aye.
Levin?
Aye.
Kennedy?
Aye.
Conquest?
Aye.
Brennan?
Aye.
Mulliner?
Aye.
Deuter?
Aye.
Sabatino?
Aye.
Leader?
Aye.
Dunn?
Aye.
Graham?
Aye.
Palumski?
Aye.
14 ayes, 0 nays.
14 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Consent agenda is approved in its entirety. Now on to committee reports. Agenda item 9.1 is a majority report. I would ask that Clerk Tamer read the recommendation.
Majority? Therefore, the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee recommends that the City Council approve the request for variation from the east side yard setback requirement of 5 feet to 3.82, provided that the shed attached to the garage is removed and building coverage of 30% is met. The city attorney is hereby directed to prepare the necessary documents for City Council approval. Signed, Michael Honquist, Chair, Mark Mulliner, Vice Chair. Unsigned, Bob Dunn, Second Ward Alderman.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the report and recommendation as read. Motion by Alderman Honquist, second by Alderman Mulliner. Alderman Honquist, your report.
Thank you, Mayor. As has been discussed in public comment a lot tonight and over the last month or so, this has been a difficult case. So I want to kind of restate what's kind of gone on over the last couple of months to kind of give a fresh perspective, particularly since we haven't discussed it in the last month. And there's several things that are now unique about this case, aside from even the zoning matter. But first I want to start with the 30% rule. In my time up here as an alderman and working in town, there's nothing that gets people more excited than when someone gives them a rule and says you have to follow it if they don't like the rule. And the 30% rule tends to be one of those rules because it lands in people's perspectives in one of two ways. It's, well, there the government is telling me what I can and can't do, or it's a regulation that could be changed. It doesn't kind of have to be that way. So the 30% rule for lot coverage in Elmhurst dates back to 1924, and it has been used for basically the last 100 years with maybe one exception. So it is a rule that the city council, not only this one, and not this mayor, but previous councils and mayors have held fast to for a lot of reasons. And overall, for the majority of people that live in Elmhurst and call Elmhurst home, it has been a good rule. We have changed a lot, particularly in the last 20 years, and I hear from a lot of people, there's too many big houses. And you're letting the city go the wrong direction because of this rule. And traditionally, as we talk through it, the point is, well, that's what as a council, as a community, we've put out there as the standard. And not only does it have the history, but in the last 20 years, as we've had this boom in town, it has been the rule that has been followed.
So a lot of people come up and say, how did such a big house get on such a tiny lot? And the answer is, it follows that 30% rule. Some people don't believe it, but we have the data, we evaluate all these cases, and that is what we go by. So in all residential cases, regardless of the particular lot size, that rule is applied. And so there are people that come, often talk to me and say, well, Mike, I just want to put, especially in today's world, I just want to put a cover over my back pool area, or the pergolas are now very popular. I want to put one on top of there. And they give me grief. Why won't you let us do it? I mean, that wouldn't even be 0.5%. And I said, well, that's our rule. That's what we do. So if it's more than that 30% rule, the city's not going to allow it. And I found that in enforcing the rule, if you will, it's created a very level playing field that people understand whether they're building a new home or adding to their home, that is the requirement the city puts in place. Now, there is the variation process, and as this applicant followed, that is the appropriate place if, for whatever reason, that rule does not make sense. And in this case, the applicant wanted to go for a variance. So the case started with staff back last summer. Unfortunately, anything, as all of you know, that goes through zoning and planning really starts with staff and follows away through the commission, to the committee, to city council, and it takes a while. It's just our process. It's slow. And that would be true really for any project. It's one of, I think, probably the biggest complaints we all get. So this case followed that, and it got to this committee, and the commission did approve the variance, and we got in a discussion about most of what I just outlined. And I even reviewing the case with staff, this was something that was well communicated, that this isn't a difficult bar to get past with us. And again, it's not me, it's us. So we started that process. At the time, as most of you know, as we went through that, and just another point, you know, there's over 14,000 homes in Elmhurst, all adhering to this rule. So as we discussed that and what would work for the applicant, I'm going to start with what I put on board docs. There's been a lot of misinformation, I know, just between us on what needs to happen. So I just want to quickly state that effectively what the applicant is trying to do is expand the home so that they can add a 4th bedroom and a 2nd full bathroom upstairs. The current configuration is 3 bedrooms with a bathroom upstairs and a half bathroom downstairs. This process, as they mentioned and is in the documentation, occurred primarily back in 2015. And at that time, they did the first major expansion to their home that got a lot of this in place. At that time also, they were required to take this quote-unquote shed off the back of their property to meet this requirement. So that's what happened, a little bit to the history and a little bit to where they're going. As the case got into discussion, we all had concerns about the size, because we said, well, based on what you're bringing to us at 36%, that's going to be hard for us to support. So we had some discussion about that, and the second document that I had reposted is the process we went through, just so everyone's clear, particularly my colleagues, of the different options. And at the time, this was probably late October that we discussed this, there was the primary option that the commission reviewed, and then they came back with looks like 4 options. Those options ranged from, I'm sorry, three additional options. The current option was the 36.63 that I just mentioned, which the zoning commission approved. The second option was a 33% option. The third option was a 35, and the fourth was roughly 35. So at that time, and previous to that time, there was a lot of discussion about, well, what could we do if we got to 33 or got to a lower percentage? Could it work? There was some confusion amongst us as a council, thinking that 33 would work. When we went back to committee the second time, we went through it, and it was pretty clear that was not an option, and that really anything less than the 36% would not work for the applicant. So we had that discussion. At that time, the three of us denied it. That report was sent to City Council. As all of you know, there was a vote taken. I was not there that night. But what's, I think, very important as we talk about our process and what we go through, that this, to all my comments, this is the same process we use for anyone that comes to City Council, regardless of the issue. And this one did the same, went through the process, went to City Council, was denied at City Council. At that point in time, there was a discussion about the applicant having a chance to come back through, kind of on a shortened time frame, to move through this process faster. Normally, when City Council says no, 99.9% of the time, that's the end of the case. And if an applicant would want to start with a different story, with some different options, they would go back through the entire process again. So, to my knowledge, I was out of town at the time. The applicant approached staff, and a process was discussed about how a case that had been heard by City Council could go back to committee. And the net of that was the applicant needed to come forward with a plan, which they did, and that plan was discussed with, quote unquote, the prevailing side, meaning the aldermen that voted against the variations. So at that point in time, what was communicated to those aldermen was, we can make the 30% lot coverage, which was a sticking point, but we would need one variation on the side yard. So two of the prevailing aldermen made a motion under the City Council rules to bring that back to committee. And when they did so, got support from the council, and the report came back to this committee. That case was heard last week. Shortly before the case was heard, I think it was the Friday, I got a phone call and said, there's an extra option. I asked why. Staff didn't completely know, but we found out much of what has been heard, that some additional space was needed. So we went into the committee meeting and discussed the option, and I, having talked to both aldermen that had made the motion, communicated to both the applicant and the people that were there that this is a very unique case. And it's unique because of what I just outlined, and that the City Council was trying to create a shorter path to get to a resolution so that they could move forward with their project. And I said, I think it would be better if we stay with the 30%, as that's what was communicated to the aldermen that took this forward. Again, I was not a part of that, but in the spirit of why they did that and what they were trying to accomplish, I thought that was a better path forward. So we discussed it. As you all know, there's a minority report, so there was some discussion to take advantage of the second option. I did not feel that was appropriate, given everything I've just outlined, and given how we address this particular process within DPZ. So that was discussed, and as I started with tonight, as you look at the case, what the applicant wants to do with their home. They're not being tossed from their home or the neighborhood. They are getting a shortened path to do the project and complete the project. It's not as advantageous as the second option, but it's in keeping with what the city council and the prevailing side thought was most appropriate, and it still gets them into the 4-bedroom, 2.5-bathroom home that they're trying to get to. So, as the majority, that's the report we put forward. We thought it was in keeping with all the discussions, particularly given the fact that City Council had denied anything larger. I think that's an important point. And as I mentioned earlier, going back through all these cases, this is a very high standard. So, with all of that said, I would ask for your support for the majority report.
Alderman Mulliner.
Alderman Hanquist did a terrific job of explaining what process we've gone through. A couple of things that I just want to make very clear. I was one of the people who put forth the motion to bring this back to committee. The reason that I did was I was told by staff clearly that there was a 30% solution by the applicant, and they were going to request a single variation. And I was willing to look at it as long as it fit within the 30% rule. Some people ask me, a lot of people ask me about the 30% and why we use percent and not square footage. One of the reasons we use percent instead of square footage relates to the fact that there are very few lots that are the exact same size in the city of Elmhurst. And in order for us to use square footage, it would just be too difficult for us to actually calculate every single one. So it's easier for us to use a percentage to figure out. Why was that put in place in the 1924? Because most of the people in 1924 were coming out from the city of Chicago, and they didn't want to have the houses sitting the same way that they did back then. They wanted a neighborhood. They wanted to have a facility that was a suburb. They didn't want to have another city of Chicago. They wanted to have some space around them. They wanted to have some land around them. Probably the most frequent question that I get asked when I'm out talking with people is, why is that house over 30%? Why is that house over 30%? And almost every time I'll go back to staff and ask them, could you check this house just to make sure so I can get back and make sure? I have found no house that exceeds the 30%. That means everybody is building within the limits of what we've set up as our guideline. I also want to make one other statement that I want to make sure that everybody fully understands. This is an extremely rare situation. I've been sitting up here for a long time, and this is the first time I can remember actually bringing a report back to the committee, the zoning committee, when we're working on the ordinance itself. We've done it a number of times when we're working on the report, and we worked on the report and said we need to send it back to committee. This time we said, hey, let's take a deep breath here, and we wanted to make sure that we were so careful with this that because staff had been told that there was a 30% solution, we went to the attorneys and said, can we do this? Is it legal for us to do this? How do we make sure that the referral is written properly so that it comes back properly? We made sure that everything was done in the fashion that it's supposed to be done so that we would do this in a way that would expedite the process and make it so that the applicant had an opportunity to build what they were interested in building. At the end of the day, what the applicant, as Alderman Honquist has said, asked to build is what they're able to build. We are not denying them the ability to put in the bathroom. We are not denying them the ability to have the 4 bedrooms. We are saying you can build it. You gave us a plan that works in the 30% footprint, and you gave us a plan that you feel comfortable with. So we felt that it was an appropriate way to go forward because we've never approved an exceeding 30% lot coverage before. So I would hope that as you look at the details in this report, that you understand that they are able to build the facility that they want to. We are not denying them that opportunity. We're giving them every opportunity to build what they wanted to build, maybe not as large as they wanted to, but they're still able to get the final product of what they were looking for. So I hope you support the majority report.
Alderman Dunn.
At this time, I would like to make a motion to submit the minority report for the majority report.
Okay, motion, there's a second with Alderman Bram. So, just for the audience, this is something that it's allowed. It's a motion to substitute one report for the other. This is the appropriate procedure that we use. Both reports cover, obviously, the same case. So as chairman, I allow crossover talk, people who support either the majority or the minority. I think it's appropriate, and I don't want to have stilted conversation. So what's going to happen now is we have a motion and a second to substitute. We will have a continued discussion about this application. What's going to happen is we will address the motion to substitute first. There will be a vote on that. If the motion to substitute is successful, then that report replaces the other report. Then we would have an additional vote, because the first vote is just to replace. If it replaces, we have a second vote to approve. If the motion to substitute fails, then it reverts back to the original or the majority report, continued discussion, and we vote on that report. I know council's pretty clear on that, right? Okay. Motion to substitute, Alderman Dunn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to point out, obviously, we have a majority and a minority report. The majority has approval for one variance, which is the setback on the east side, and the minority report has a approval on two variance requests, that same setback on the east side of about a foot, a little over a foot, and that's for an eave that sticks out a little bit. We were both the majority and the minority report are in agreement to let that go forward. Where it differs is the lot coverage requirement. We did, I thank Alderman Honquist and Alderman Mulliner for explaining and giving some background on that, so I don't have to go into a lot of detail on that, but I am a very big proponent of the 30% max coverage requirement. I think that was important in the development of our town to give the character that we have in terms of the look and feel of the buildings we have in town, some more open space and open feel compared to, say, what we would see in Chicago. So it is important. This 30% helps to control the mass of structures in town, so people are not building lot line to lot line with small setbacks. And I think it's served us well over the years. The city uses that along with setback requirements and the use of our parkways. We have larger parkways than you would see in Chicago, just to give us more of that open feel. So that's part of what makes us a great town to live in. The 30% rule tends to have positive implications on stormwater management as well, with having less buildings and non-permeable structures. I think that's important, and I'm glad that we've considered that and held fairly tight to that over the years. But no policy or ordinance is perfect or all-encompassing, and that's why there is a consideration to be flexible on those and allow some variation to those hard and fast rules that we have, given compelling reasons to move off that. What are those reasons? Those three reasons have been outlined: the uniqueness of it, the impact to the neighborhood appearance, and also the reasonable return. For me, the fact that One thing I asked for from staff was, I asked for a map of the city, and I wanted to know how many lots were below 5,000 square feet. So they gave me a map. I know you all can't see this, but they were scattered throughout. And at first I was surprised that there were that many. There were about 30 on the north side of town of that small size and 30 on the south side. However, only 3 of them were buildable with a home on them. And that's been mentioned. So that's quite a unique situation. The impact of the neighborhood. This extension is in the back. I don't believe it will have negative impacts. It's very modest at 1%. And there has been no neighbor that has spoken out against this. So I really feel that condition is upheld. And as far as the reasonable return, the applicant, as was stated, proposed a follow-on revision to their project of a 30% concept, which involved a cantilever design, which is a part that sticks out and hangs out of the side of the building. That, to me, probably didn't even look as nice as the 31%. I thought that was an odd-looking concept, and I didn't feel it was as structurally sound as the little bit larger option. And with the larger option, the applicant would get a little more space. It is a very small house to begin with. And of course be able to get the second bathroom. But I also, of note, is that they would have to move out for 3 to 4 months with the cantilever design because of the impact of the building of that cantilever design in the house, and the lack of use of the other shower, or their only bathroom and shower. So, to me, I felt that the 31% clearly was a better option, better return for the applicant to allow them to enjoy the property. It's a 1% waiver on our policy that we've held pretty strict to, that's why I moved the minority report forward and chose that option. The applicant did present a 30% option, as they indicated in the previous council meeting, where the ordinance was up for vote. And then it was subsequently pulled back. So they did offer that 30% option, but they also gave us another option to chew on, which I feel is a reasonable request. It's a good one. So this 30% requirement for me is a visual. It's a requirement for visual appeasement, and I don't think that this small addition is going to be a negative impact to the neighborhood or the community or Elmhurst overall. I think that this is a reasonable request. I am supportive of it. And initially, they had requested something just below 37%, and then that was adjusted to below 35%. Those were a little large for me, given how far they were off our current requirement. But I think this small, modest request is definitely the right thing to do here. It's a very small exceedant of our requirement, and I think it's the best solution for the applicant, the neighborhood, and the the community on the whole. So I would ask the council to support the minority report given those reasons. Thanks.
Okay, additional comments? Alderman Brennan.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I grew up in Kendallville, Indiana, in a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house with five kids, 2 parents. So it certainly gets crowded. Luckily, I was the baby, and 2 went off and left the nest, but still 3 kids at home with 2 parents. Certainly built character, but totally understand the challenge associated with it. First off, I welcome and appreciate the residents who have shown up tonight. It's important for me personally to hear from you, and sometimes that isn't always the case. Maybe it's an email exchange or a text, this or that, but it's nice to hear from you in person. Unfortunately, my job requires me to deal with problems every day. And during my day job, I have to go into work. I have to, listen very well. I have to keep an open mind in order to solve problems. That's the only way you can advance, the ball at my work anyways. So I particularly didn't like the way the minority report arrived to council today. I thought we're going to get a 30% plan, and actually when I heard that there's a plan at 30% that would allow the applicant to get another bedroom and bathroom, I was actually very happy. And when the 31% came in, I was just conflicted with what had happened. And to be quite honest, I came in here this evening, with intention to support the majority report. But I've sat here, I've listened to the residents, I've listened to the applicant, Mark. I appreciated some of your comments. I was a no vote initially on the prevailing side. To Alderman Dunn, I totally agree. At 36, 35, 35, those plans were too big for me. And that's why I voted no. I also am very hesitant and take very seriously the 30%. I think it's something that we should debate, and we should not, deviate from that without significant debate. So what really turned me, to be quite honest, was, the incremental construction costs, the impact of the family with having to move out. I totally understand and appreciate the hardship that would come with that. And, to be frank, 31% is far from 35%. So for all those reasons, I'm gonna end up tonight supporting the minority report, which is a deviation. So I do appreciate everybody coming out, sharing your point of view, and that's it. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, additional comments? Alderman Levin.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this has been one of those variation requests that has probably gathered more public input, and I've gotten a lot of comment on it. I'm not going to keep it a secret that I am in support of the minority report, but I usually don't get involved in the public comment side, but I want people to understand a bit of the process. I don't want any aspersions to be cast upon the DPZ or the people on the majority side, because in my opinion, there are decisions like this which have a number of different viewpoints, and reasonable people can reach different conclusions, and the DPZ has put a lot of work into this. And I honestly believe that every alderman up here, particularly on this particular issue, is doing the right thing and voting the way they think the matter's supposed to go. Some of the things that are talked about, I will tell you, are not relevant to me. It doesn't matter why the Anglowitzes moved here or why they would say it, and I'm not belittling any of the comments. I just want to tell you where I got to. To me, it's not about permeable surface. They would have to comply. The DPZ is not required to find those three factors to deny. It's really the other way around. It's about, are those factors met, and is there evidence of those factors to support the variation? That's what's required. On the topic in specific, everyone who talks about the 30% limitation agrees it's been a pretty hard line. It's rarely been crossed, and I don't take it any more lightly than most people, I should say. It looks like there's a couple more take it more hard than I do. But this is a unique circumstance. So I'm not going to repeat fully what I said before, but we've got the 30% rule, and for the majority of the time, the vast majority of the time, it's the right rule, it's the solid rule, it's the correct rule. But the variance ordinance is for cases just like this. It's to deal with the unique circumstance, and this lot is of substandard size. You don't have to, the standard isn't a reasonable return on investment and provide the owner a reasonable enjoyment. It's one or the other. And in, Alderman Brennan, we had 5 kids. We only had 2 bedrooms, so I just want to tell you. But right now I have 2 kids and 5 bathrooms, so it's just the opposite, But that's the way it goes. We have to look for modern times and what a reasonable use of property is today. So we have the substandard size. A reasonable use would support these 2 bathrooms. I think the 31% option is not just the better option. I look at the 30% option as being minimally acceptable because if you went with the 30% option, I would ask at what cost? At what sacrifice, both in terms of moving out and in terms of design? So I think those are factors you have to take into consideration in addition to say, yes, it would work. So this is different. It's not someone coming in saying, I want to cover, I want a shed or I want to cover a pool or something. That's not this case. We would never say yes to that. And I have someone down the block who came and said, well, and I don't know what happened, but they said they've got a new house with a new garage in the front and they wanted to keep the garage in the back. And I said, you can talk to staff, but I don't think I'm going to be able to help you on that because if it requires a variance, I couldn't support it because it's not that unique kind of case. So some types of variances are more common. We're used to seeing them. This one is rare, but it still meets the standards. And despite the procedural history, and I don't dispute the way it was described by the chair, we can make it work. And we can make it work for this resident by allowing them this much. We're not giving anything away. We're not breaking down a barrier that there's going to be a mad rush for people coming because there aren't other lots like this. It's very unlikely this would occur again. So, 1%ers used to have a negative connotation here in society, but here I think we can turn it into a positive connotation, and I think we should make it work for this applicant. Thank you.
Additional comments? Alderman Toledo, and then I'll go to Alderman Park.
Thank you. So tonight, I'm going to comment on why I support the majority report, and there's 3 reasons. First and foremost, this option, as has been discussed, does give the applicant a way to build their addition. The applicant provided this option to us as a viable solution to construct the addition. As confirmed by the builder, it does provide a path forward to build a second full bath and a 4th bedroom, which the applicant stated in their application was the purpose of the addition. Secondly, the majority report and the option provided, the 30% option, does not require a lot coverage variation at all. In the original 36% lot coverage variation request, I did not feel, as I stated at the meeting, that the third standard was met. And I still feel that way because the family has had reasonable enjoyment of this property and will continue to do so when they add the second bath and bedroom, which they plan to do either way with either option. That's why I cannot support any lot coverage variation in this case. With that said, I did then and I do now support the side yard variation, as the addition cannot be built at all without it. So I believe all the standards for that variation are met. Finally, supporting the majority report is consistent with the option that I supported when I made the motion to reconsider this case. Without that motion, unfortunately, at that stage in the process, the applicant's case would have ended with no way to build their addition. Finally, since my integrity has been called into question tonight, I'd like to publicly share with those here the ways that I have worked to assist the applicant throughout this process, as I would with any resident that I represent. First, at the beginning of the process, I provided constructive feedback on the application to help make it as strong as it could be. I met with the applicant at their home to review the plans in person and to brainstorm ideas to help meet their goals. I investigated with my other Fourth Ward colleague and zoning staff the creation of a new residential zone for this and the few other properties like it to apply different lot coverage standards in that zone to help the applicant achieve their goals. Unfortunately, this option did not have the support of the council to move forward. I also spoke on the phone directly with the applicant to ensure that I understood their position in their case. And finally, as a member of the prevailing side in the 36% variation vote, I seconded the motion to reconsider the case and send it back to committee. Without this effort, the applicant's case would have ended with no way to move forward. So again, I will support the majority report tonight because the third standard for the 31% lot coverage variation has not, in my opinion, been met. Thank you.
Alderman Park.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am in full support of the minority report, and I appreciate Alderman Dunn putting that together. I appreciate standards and structure and ordinances that serve our residents and what that has created for us since 1924, because I love our town and the character of it, and so many people that come and visit us from near and far say the same thing. But if we hold fast just to algorithms or a 30% rule, then, you know, we really don't need a city council. I mean, we are elected to serve and analyze these unique situations and consider the request for exceptions to our written rules. And I believe that this case has presented more than enough that it is an appropriate exception for our written rules. And so I encourage all of our city council members to do the same and support the minority report. Thank you.
Any additional comments? Alderman Polomsky?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank DP&Z and staff for your dedication to seeing this application through. There are many questions about what was really happening tonight, and I'm glad that some of those questions were answered. There are two themes and comments that I've heard tonight, and also in my neighborhood. I live less than 2 blocks away from the applicant. And those are that this is an incredibly unique case and that the neighbors support the application. You know, there have been a number of inaccurate statements about this agenda item, and many that I've read and heard serve to diminish the effort or the underlying rationale for why somebody would vote the way they do. You know, we went through an atypical process to get here, and I'm afraid that with the way that we're proceeding, maybe people will hesitate in the future to bring an agenda item back to committee. I want to thank Alderman Toledo. I'm glad that she spoke about her how she has been consistent and also assisted in this process. Again, without her and without Alderman Mulliner, this application would have to start again at the beginning. I've actually read online that this is an appeal. An appeal would go through the Zoning Planning Commission. It doesn't come through here. But in addition to the way in which Alderman Toledo has assisted this process, I also want to point out that before this even began, a number of the neighbors went on the record stating that while we were proceeding with our downtown zone planning changes, that they wanted to be sure to preserve the character of the area around Jewel and right around this neighborhood. And it was Alderman Toledo who made the amendments to retain that area to be single-family residential. So again, this is consistent with the way in which she has assisted the neighborhood. And again, she talked about the idea she had to have a different type of zone, like with a tiered coverage area based on the size of the lot. You know, I know that most people are looking at this point with two different reports. Are we voting for the 31 or the 30? But we also wouldn't have gotten here had Alderman Dunn not originally asked to see some options. Alderman Honquist talked about that. So as this proceeded, it was Alderman Dunn that said, you know what, is there a way for you to achieve this without 36? And so just to get that discussion going, to see how we could find a way to identify a solution that the entire council could support. Alderman Honquist, as the chairman of DP&Z, facilitated this process and called multiple meetings to revisit different plans and revisions of this application. And again, we motioned and seconded to reconsider this on December 2nd. And this is a bigger deal, I think, than most people may realize, and here's why. The barrier in this process has been the 30% limit, and the city's only allowed development in R2 to surpass that 2 times. At least one of those was an error, or there was some error with it. It didn't go through city council. There's been in that way, we've been hesitant to break our own rule of 30%. Not to say that we shouldn't consider those opportunities and not follow our rules, but I want to point out that we didn't follow our rules in allowing the applicant to resubmit an application. On December 16th, when we entertained the motion to reconsider our vote, but we actually didn't reconsider it, meaning we didn't vote again to get a yay or nay vote on the agenda item. We voted to reconsider and to send it back to committee. But that was our good faith effort to help the applicant proceed in seeking the approval of a new proposal that had not been previously presented. It was an effort to allow the applicant to build an addition that included a second full bath or a third bathroom and a 4th bedroom while staying within the city's 30% lot coverage limit. Because details that needed to be addressed would need to be vetted, it was more fitting to go to committee, although realistically it should have stayed at council. We did follow the rules, though, in initiating action and taking that, in which, as we've heard tonight, we had the 2 members of the prevailing side make a motion and a second to revisit this. And all the aldermen up here supported that. All of the aldermen wanted the applicant to have an opportunity to not have to start again and to have the opportunity to proceed with the plan to have an extra bedroom and an extra full bath. The action to go back to committee, even though we were at the ordinance stage, was atypical. And in trying to decide how to vote here, no matter the way I vote, it's inconsistent with some other way that I've approached it. But that's how this agenda item has gone. We've had a number of decisions made that were not typical. But going back to supporting the amendment of 33%. I will support the minority report reflecting the 31% coverage. Thanks.
Any additional comments? From York.
Thank you, Your Honor. So to me, as I expressed earlier, it was always about the three particular lots that were addressed by Alderman Dunn, the size of the lots. And that's what makes this really stand out. So I'm kind of rooted there. I will support the minority report. I'd like to just say, though, too, that it is shameful that my Fourth Ward colleague, Alderman Toledo, has been put under the microscope in the way she has, because I've been with her when she's met with the applicants and talked to them, and we've worked together on this. So that's very disappointing to me. Thank you.
Any other comments? Alderman Deuter?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't need to lengthen the discussion, but as I said at the last meeting, I think this is a reasonable request. I think we have the ability to make exceptions in cases just like this one. I think they've met the standards, and I support the minority report.
Anyone else? All right, I'm going to call for a vote on the motion to substitute. So to remind council and attendees, this is just to replace one with the other. If this motion prevails, then it's before council for consideration. If this motion fails, the majority report is before council. Clerk Tamer, please call the vote on the motion to substitute.
York?
Aye.
Toledo?
No.
Park?
Aye.
Levin?
Aye.
Kennedy?
No.
Honquist?
No.
Brennan?
Aye.
Mulliner?
No.
Deuter?
Aye.
Sabatino?
No.
Leader?
Aye.
Dunn?
Aye.
Graham?
Aye.
Palumski?
Aye.
9 ayes, 5 nays.
9 ayes, 5 nays. Motion to substitute carries. So now that motion, the minority report has been substituted. Now we will continue discussion on the motion that is, or the report that is now before us, which is the minority report. Any additional, I think most of the conversation's been had, but any additional conversation as it relates to the new report before us? Alderman Bram.
Thank you. I'll make this brief because everything really has been said. I do want to thank the public. I want to thank the Engelwitz family as well. I think, at least from my perception, the petitioner has done everything under their power to come to some type of compromise, getting what they want and being as fair to their neighbors, the neighborhood, and our current codes as all possible. As I was listening to my colleagues up here speak to the issue, some of which have spoken to what I consider to be very pertinent and really, if not the main things that we should be considering when we consider a variance, and that is those 3 conditions that some have spoken to, but others have not. And that is concerning to me because I think that should be really our primary focus when making these decisions, is those 3 conditions. The 30% variation rule is that we don't vary off of that, no pun intended, very often, and there's good cause for that. I'm not going to sit up here and speculate why. I think it was quoted in 1924 that was instituted. I wasn't around. So I can't speak to or have any speculation on the rationale behind it, but it has served the city of Elmhurst well. The motion to reconsider, to me, the motion to reconsider was just that, to bring it back to committee, to come back with possibly some type of compromise. I didn't care if it was at the 30%, or 32. I was interested in hearing what that compromise was going to be. There is no obligation for the petitioner to just submit 30%. The obligation was to come back with something that they thought was going to move forward. They, in my opinion, went above and beyond and submitted two options. I believe the most appropriate options, and some of my colleagues have spoken to it, is the 31.09% option. It's not going to be detrimental to the neighborhood. It is going to serve them a reasonable return. And I wasn't, I guess, had the same circumstances as some aldermen growing up, but I grew up a family of 5 with 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. Imagine sharing that 1 bathroom. It was a fight every day. I found it a little bit ironic that today on the consent agenda, we had 2 variations. No, it wasn't about the 30% lot coverage, but 2 variations for 2 of our schools in town for front yard setbacks and a variation for a fence variation to over double the height for the fence and chop in half the front yard setback for one of the schools. But there's no questions on that. A variation should be looked at by a case-by-case basis, and I hope we move forward with the 31.09% because I deeply believe that this variation is a very unique case, as others have spoken to, as well as meets every single one, and I don't say this often, but every single one, thanks for laughing, Alderman Park. Anybody who knows me knows that I don't say it very often, that it meets every single one of those criteria, hands down. So I hope that we get a unanimous support of this minority report and grant a very fair compromise to the Englowitz family.
Okay. Not that I would ever accuse Alderman Bram of speaking out of order, but it's kind of a belt and suspenders sort of thing. I can't recall what we've done in the past, but we haven't actually read the minority report into the record or had a motion to approve the majority report. We just did a motion to substitute.
You're right.
So I'm going to ask the clerk, and again, I'm not accusing you of being out of order, Alderman Bram, as much as I might want to.
Not might.
I'm going to ask Clerk Tamer to read the recommendation for the record, and then I'm going to ask for a motion and a second of the minority report.
Therefore, the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee recommend that the City Council approve the applicant's request for variations from the building coverage requirement of 30% to 31.09% and approve a variation from the east side yard setback requirement of 5 feet to 3.82, provided that the shed attached to the garage is removed and building coverage does not exceed 31.09%. The city attorney is hereby directed to prepare the necessary documents for city council approval. Signed, Bob Dunn, Alderman Ward 2, unsigned Michael Conquest, Chair, Mark Mulliner, Vice Chair.
Okay, so I think we've done both in the past, and I will get further clarification from attorneys later. But certainly think it's important. Lawyers call it belt and suspenders. The question is, does the minority report technically become the majority report? And is the underlying original motion then in order? I don't know. We're going to go with what I just asked for, which is an approval of the report that we just read, that you all approved to be our report before. So I will entertain a motion to approve the report and recommendation as read. Motion by Alderman Levin, second by Alderman Dunn. Okay, continued conversation that is in order. Not necessary, but if anyone else. Okay, I'll now entertain, I will now ask for the vote for the motion before us, which is to approve the report.
York?
Aye.
Toledo?
No.
Park?
Aye.
Levin?
Aye.
Kennedy?
Nope.
Conquest?
No.
Brennan?
Aye.
Mulliner?
No.
Deuter?
Aye.
Sabatino?
Nope.
Leader?
Aye.
Dunn?
Aye.
Bram?
Aye.
Palumsky?
Aye.
9 ayes, 5 nays.
Say that again, please.
9 ayes.
9 ayes, 5 nays, motion carries. Motion, report is approved. I will remind the audience and council, this comes back before us in 2 weeks. So we have to codify it with a resolution, Don?
An ordinance.
An ordinance. So this ordinance will be back before us in 2 weeks. All right, on to agenda item 10, reports and recommendations of appointed and elected officials. Mayor Morley, that is me. 2 quick points. First of all, it was my honor to deliver the State of the City report or address last Thursday, the 16th. I want to thank the Chamber for sponsoring the event, and I want to thank Community Bank of Elmhurst for hosting that event. I went out a little long. I think I rambled for 45 minutes. That State of the City will be broadcast sometime in February. They usually do it on cable a couple times a week in February, and then ultimately it will be a link on the Chamber's website to go to YouTube. So I encourage you all, and thank you for all of the aldermen and folks who are in the audience who attended. I appreciate it. Thank you to staff and aldermen who helped me with the content. Every year I have to figure out how to take a 3-hour speech and try to narrow it down into 30 minutes. Because there's that much good stuff going on in Elmhurst. Finally, council, before you is this green sheet. Everyone should have a copy of this. This is called our LAP. It's a Legislative Action Plan Program, Legislative Action Program. As council is aware, we are members of DMMC, Two-Page Mayors and Managers, and every year our legislative side of that body binds together to hopefully have a stronger voice in Springfield. What you have before us is what is distilled down to our major points of what we try to affect in Springfield. We are, DuPage County, quite frankly, is in a minority down there, and it is one-party rule down in Springfield. So we do what we can with the bandwidth that we have. We also have drafter's notes that backs up. It's probably a 6 or 8 page document that backs up the rationale behind this. But if you've ever been down on a drive down with us down to Springfield, you know that you can't get a representative's attention for more than 10 minutes, let alone 10 seconds. So we narrowed it down to one piece. We have had successes in the past. Most recently, as I stated, the option, legalized recreational marijuana was coming to Illinois. Our work allowed us to at least have an option to opt out of it, which we did. There was a 2% management fee on our tax collection that we worked on, and 1 year we got that reduced to 1%. So we do our best at the MMC with the tools we have available to us. Please feel free to familiarize yourself with this. It's what we use when we contact our Springfield officials. That's it for me. City Manager.
Thank you. 2 items. One, this Saturday, we will host an electronic recycling event at the Public Works Garage on Riverside Drive. That is from 8 to noon. Information on the website. And the second item that I have is we've been participating in a Route 83 planning procedure or process. There will be a workshop held next Wednesday, the 29th, at the Villa Park Library from 6 to 8 p.m.
All right, any other reports from the dais? Alderman Dunn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick report on O'Hare Noise Compatibility Commission, ONCC. Attended a meeting on Friday, January 10th. We had off for a month or two. So they went over the IFQ, the interim fly quiet started in the early November. And as a result of that, we did see some more traffic at night from the runways that impact us. We saw 2% of the landings going on, landing on runway 4R, and it's generally been 0 in the past, and then 20% of the departures on 22L that head towards Elmhurst, which is a little bit elevated. As a result of that, they track complaints in the surrounding municipalities around O'Hare, and that November month, Elmhurst was second highest in complaints. So, please use that. I would urge the residents to use that complaint system online to have their lodge their complaints for noise. Almost all of it's noise. Some of it's low-flying aircraft, and we have this summer there's construction on the runways that impact Elmhurst, so we will be off the IFQ, or interim fly quiet, for several months during the summer, which would give us some relief. That's it.
Okay, any other reports? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Alderman Sabatino, second by Alderman Deuter. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.